Rivarol was left gaping a moment. Absorbed in his ridiculous anger, he had considered nothing, but he made a quick recovery. "To my captain, if you please," he commanded peremptorily, and was turning to lead the way, when Blood arrested him. "With submission, my general, we shall be better here. You behold there the scene of our coming action. It is spread before you like a map." He waved his hand towards the lagoon, the country flanking it, and the considerable city standing back from the beach. "If it is not a presumption in me to offer a suggestion—" He paused. Monsieur de Rivarol looked at him sharply, suspecting irony, but the swarthy face was bland, the keen eyes steady. "Let us hear your suggestion," he consented. Blood pointed out the fort at the mouth of the inner harbor, which was just barely visible above the waving palms on the intervening tongue of land. He announced that its armament was less formidable than that of the outer fort, which they had reduced, but, on the other hand, the passage was very much narrower than the Bocaccia, and before they could attempt to make it in any case, they must dispose of those defenses. He proposed that the French ships should enter the outer harbor and proceed at once to bombardment. Meanwhile, he would land 300 buccaneers and some artillery on the eastern side of the lagoon, beyond the fragrant garden island dense with richly bearing fruit trees, and proceed simultaneously to storm the fort in the rear. Thus beset on both sides at once, and demoralized by the fate of the much stronger outer fort, he did not think that the Spaniards would offer a very long resistance. Then it would be for Monsieur Rivarol to garrison the fort, while Blood would sweep on with his men and seize the church of Nuestra Senora de la Puopa, plainly visible on its hill immediately eastward of the town. Not only did that eminence afford them a valuable and obvious strategic advantage, but it commanded the only road that led from Crtgn to the interior, and once it were held, there would be no further question of the Spaniards attempting to remove the wealth of the city. That, to Monsieur de Rivarol, was, as Captain Blood had judged it would be, the crowning argument. Supercilious until that moment, and disposed for his own pride's sake to treat the buccaneer's suggestion with cavalier criticism, Monsieur de Rivarol's manner suddenly changed. He became alert and brisk, and went so far as tolerantly to command Captain Blood's plan, as issued orders that action might be taken upon it at once. It is not necessary to follow the action step by step. Blunders on the part of the French marred its smooth execution, and the indifferent handling of their ships led to the sinking of 2 of them in the course of the afternoon by the fort's gunfire. But by evening, owing largely to the irresistible fury with which the buccaneers stormed the place from the landward side, the fort had surrendered, and before dusk, Blood and his men, with some ordnance hauled thither by mules, dominated the city from the heights of Nuestra Senora de la Popa. At noon on the morrow, shorn of defenses and threatened with bombardment, Crtgn sent offers of surrender to Monsieur de Rivarol. Swollen with pride by a victory for which he took the entire credit to himself, the Baron dictated his terms. He demanded that all public effects and office accounts be delivered up, that the merchants surrender all moneys and goods held by them for their correspondence. The inhabitants could choose whether they would remain in the city or depart, but those who went must first deliver up all their property, and those who elected to remain must surrender half and become the subjects of France. Religious houses and churches should be spared, but they must render accounts of all moneys and valuables in their possession. Crtgn agreed, having no choice in the matter, and on the next day, which was the 5th of April, Monsieur de Rivarol entered the city and proclaimed it now a French colony, appointing Monsieur de Cossey its governor. Thereafter he proceeded to the cathedral, where very properly a Te Deum was sung in honor of the conquest. This by way of grace, whereafter Monsieur de Rivarol proceeded to devour the city. The only detail in which the French conquest of Crtgn differed from an ordinary buccaneering raid was that under the severest penalties no soldier was to enter the house of any inhabitant. But this apparent respect for the person and property of the conquered was based in reality upon Monsieur de Rivarol's anxiety lest the doubloon should be abstracted from all the wealth that was pouring into the treasury opened by the Baron in the name of the King of France. Once the golden stream had ceased, he removed all restrictions and left the city in prey to his men, who proceeded further to pillage it of that part of their property which the inhabitants who became French subjects had been assured should remain inviolate. The plunder was enormous. In the course of 4 days, over 100 mules laden with gold went out of the city and down to the boats waiting at the beach to convey the treasure aboard the ships. End of chapter.